Through the Well of Pirene by Ether Echoes. Chapter 7. Reunion. And he arose, and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. Luke, chapter 15, verse 20. Daphne. The land surrounding Ponyville is sprawling and free, much like the town itself from the look of it. We picked as our hiding place a peaceful grove of trees not far from the large farm, in sight of a number of cottages and smaller farms. A few of them jutted right up against the edge of the everfree forest. There was a large pond with a swing nailed to a tree branch not far off, but it was unlikely anyone, nor any pony, would see Marcus, Hector, and Naomi from there. It must have been past harvest, because it seemed as though there wasn't much in the ground. I didn't know if they had snow in Equestria, but winter was pretty close back home. No ponies were in sight, at least not yet.
If this place were any more cute, I would be vomiting.
Marcus glanced up as he settled down in a tree hollow. Despite what I thought were reasonable concerns of security given the monsters barely a mile back, even Marcus had elected to pack away his rifle. He was right, though. It was hard to think of this place as dangerous in any way. "I could stand it to be a little cuter," Naomi said. She had settled on her belly with a pair of binoculars. "One of them has a little basket. She's carrying it in her mouth. She's got a pale blue coat and lilac mane." Marcus thumbed at Naomi.
"Well, she doesn't need an entertainment. Why didn't we bring something to read?"
I looked up from rummaging in our packs. Because we had no idea how long it would take to get here, so we packed only what we needed.
"I know, but still,"
he grumbled, stretched and lay back.
"I'll get some shut-eye, then keep watch. Oh, and Daff?"
I paused in the middle of my search to regard him.
"Good luck. I hope the meeting goes well,"
Marcus said, pointedly looking at the branches over my head. I was left momentarily at a loss how to respond, rubbing one leg against the other. "Thank you. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Bring me back a souvenir," Naomi called as I stepped out of the grove, walking towards town. It felt weird to be doing that while stark naked, my clothes discarded in favor of the rising warmth, but I reasoned that leitmotif's chronic lack of clothing, and Naomi not noting any on the mare she had seen, meant that it was reasonably likely for that not to be a problem. If it was, well, getting booked for public nudity was a bad way to start a trip, but I could think of worse. At the very least, my mane had been smoothed out by Naomi's patient hand, and my tail fell neatly behind me. She really did like brushing me far too much. The road beneath my hooves was easy to walk on, and even an easy trot was eating ground up. The anticipation of meeting others of my new kind was becoming overpowering. I'd only met one pony in my life, and that one a child as strange as myself, so there could have been any number of cultural barriers or deadly faux pas that were waiting for me to run headfirst into them. Starting to regulate my breathing, I prepared for the inevitable introduction. I would approach a pony, introduce myself, and, calmly, "Hello," a voice called cheerfully. "Ah!" I screamed, springing up and spinning to face the owner of the voice. A unicorn who stepped back a pace and stared at me, her golden eyes wide. She waved a mint green leg in front of my face. "Are you okay? Because if you're not, I should warn you that I am extremely not qualified to perform any medical aid." I exhaled slowly, putting a hoof to my chest. This was the first real live pony I'd seen in 8 years, so I looked her up and down as surreptitiously as I could. Her pale, almost white mane was cut short, like mine, though it ran a little long in the back. Also like mine, her tail hung long, and had a bold arc that fell nearly to the earth, though with a little wave near the bottom mine did not have. She wore no clothing aside from a pair of saddlebags and white and gold lyre buckles. I murmured. "I'm sorry. Hi." Hi. She sounded rather more uncertain now, though for someone who was probably half convinced that I was crazy, she still wore a bemused grin. Look, if you need a doctor, I can... Whoa! Where did Cutie Mark go? She asked, tilting her head.
What?
I asked, and turned my head to follow her gaze. Her eyes were on my haunches, and I looked back at the same spot on her. A golden lyre was picked out against her coat, as if the hairs there had all been carefully and individually dyed. Cutie Mark! She repeated the phrase as if it explained everything. My blank expression must have told her I was still having trouble, so she said again, more slowly. Cutie Marker! Or Mark. Whatever. You know. The thing on your butt that isn't your tail. Talent indicator. Tail accessorizer. Impending puberty warning sticker. Integrated conversation starter. Apparently, my first cultural barrier had something to do with a butt stamp. Grand. Oh, of course, I said, my brain on autopilot. It was a prank. My friends picked up a spell, and this was their idea of a good luck in your trip gift. I haven't figured out how to undo it yet. Huh. That sounds kind of hilarious, actually. I should try that one sometime. I'm Lyra, by the way. Nice to meet you. Where are you visiting from? Crap. I searched my memory, trying to recall any place other than Ponyville. Concentrating on part of the area off the road, I conjured up another recollection. I blinked, and there they were, as if they really stood there. Little Daphne walked with her arms out for balance, dirty bare feet on a log. So, that's my dream house, she said, looking towards Leitmotif, the filly laying with her hooves crossed. One question. What's a spaceship? Light asked, lifting her ears in puzzlement. It's a ship, little Daphne swooped her hand up, that goes into space. Light tilted her head, trying to pass that one for a moment before giving up. Well, I would want to live in Canterlot. I'd live in my own castle right next to the princess. It would have dragon guards, its own zoo. The image unravelled as I jerked my head back to Lyra, answering. Canterlot. Oh, neat! I'm from Canterlot too. Well, I got my degree there. Oh, well, I attended Celestia's magic school there. Applied. She paused. And crashed in the dorm. But, you know, Princess Celestia graduated me anyway. Where in Canterlot are you from? Double crap. Oh, I'm from near the school, I said, rather than trying to rely on memory again. Somehow, I didn't think a little filly's fantasy dream house would be all that informative. Whoa. And you're travelling like this? She motioned to my saddlebags. From the sounds of it, her estimation of me had either gone up a hair or dropped considerably. Yeah, I said carelessly. My folks get really overprotective. Always want me to travel around with bags full of junk and not embarrass them. Lyra sympathized. Sounds like my roommate. I quietly exulted at being so on target, as Lyra perked up suddenly. Hey, maybe I could give a crack at that spell in your butt. I'm not the greatest at that sort of magic, but I did graduate and all. I arched a brow. The circumstances surrounding that graduation sounded a little fishy. Nonsense! I received my diploma from Celestia's own hoof. She regarded me purely on my academic antics. Merits. Academic merits. Well, okay. I managed to keep my smile from turning sickly by sheer force of will. In being as helpful as possible, this mare kept finding ways to make my life more difficult. While I was curious to see unicorn magic in operation after Leitmotif's stories, I also didn't know what it might reveal, or if Lyra might turn me into a toad by accident. To be entirely fair, I had no idea whether the truth of the matter would hurt or not, that I had no cutie mark, whatever that was, or that I wasn't even a pony. It was a gamble, but more information was generally better than less. Besides, If I had gone herring off into a city back on Earth, it would have been suicidally optimistic to expect such a warm welcome. Lyra focused her attention, and to my amazement, her horn lit up. It was nothing at all like the magnesium flare of the wand I had seen in the woods, but a gentle golden glow that encased the entire length of her spiraled horn. A similar aura touched my haunches, and I jumped a little at a tickling sensation that ran up my spine. There was a hiss and a gentle pop, but all my coat did was bleach slightly for a moment before darkening again. Well, so much for that idea. I was hoping they'd just recolour your coat, which is exactly what I would have done and have done in the past. Lyra pouted, but then she brightened. You know, who can help you, though? I'll bet anything Twilight Sparkle over in the library would know how. I don't think there's a single spell she hasn't been intimate with in the past. I opened my mouth, but she waved a hoof, interrupting me. Yeah, I know, she's a princess now and all, but she's not going to turn any pony aside or stand on ceremony or whatever. If she'll see me for random hellos, she'll see you for a spell, no problem. Thanks, I said quickly, starting to turn back to the road. I'll go do that right away, Lyra. You've been a big help. I started to trot, hoping to get away before she could ask any more inconvenient questions. No problem. She waved. Oh, hey, I didn't catch your name. Admittedly, you didn't throw it, so I don't think that's really my fault, but I'd still like to hear it. All right, so that wasn't a question, but it certainly was inconvenient. It could have been answered with a made-up pony name, of course. Chances are, Lyra wouldn't have batted an eye at whatever mishmash of terms I could have thrown at her, though I was displaying a disturbing talent of coming up with things she knew more about than I did. However, I already felt pretty bad for lying to her after she had been so nice to me. Besides, my name is actually a thing. Daphne, I told her, giving her a friendly smile. Okay, so Daphnes are a kind of shrub, which is hardly the most glamorous of things, but whatever. Nice meeting you, Daphne. Good luck. She waved her hoof even more enthusiastically. It seemed not everything had to go wrong for me. With a new spring in my hooves, I headed towards town, though not before adjusting my borrowed saddlebags so that they covered my rump. No sense inviting more scrutiny than I would doubtless already accrue. Determination and a sense of adventure set in, each carrying my steps to Ponyville. It might be said that the most remarkable thing about Ponyville was how unremarkable it was. It was a perfectly normal town. Oh, certainly, its streets meandered along in the way one would expect an old-world village or ancient city-heart in Europe to, allergic to straight lines and relentlessly quaint. But that's what someone would expect from a country town in a place like this. It sprawled pretty far, but ponies were obviously used to walking long distances. They used the empty spaces creatively, filling them with gardens and trees. Indeed, the town had such a rural feel to it that I wondered if parts of it weren't more meadow than town. The occasional windmill or colourful tent was balanced by cheerful houses of thatched roofs and solid, sensible plaster. I paused on a small footbridge, taking the sight in. The river under me ran right through the town, and I watched a boat pass underneath with a couple snuggled in the bow. Their little canoe passed by a pier, where a bulky pony in a shirt and straw hat fished with a line in the water. Really, if it weren't for the cornucopia of colourful horses running the place, I might have thought that I had taken a sudden trip to a particularly rustic section of Germany. If anything, the greatest shock was when I saw a trio of mares talking on the side of the road with a stallion. He was clearly distinguished from the female of the species by his slightly greater height and blockier appearance, rather than his charcoal coat and white mohawk of a mane. Even this small sample of the population was more vibrantly coloured than I had imagined, even after seeing Lyra, who was day to leitmotif's night hues. The riot of colours was astounding. When the stallion suddenly spread a pair of dark feathered wings from his side, however, I stopped and stared. He gave them a beat and launched effortlessly into the air, as easily as a pony might run across the road, and my jaw fell to the road. I had to pick it up with my hoof and reinsert it, twice, before I could get it to stop falling open. Within moments, he was a dark speck, and he wasn't alone in the sky either. Other winged ponies swooped and dived under the clouds as though they were born to the air. Perhaps they were, for that matter. Leitmotif had mentioned Pegasi, of course. I had remembered that as early as yesterday afternoon. Knowing on some level that they existed was one thing. Seeing one soar through the air as easily as he pleased was another entirely. Some of those girls he had been carousing with hadn't neither wings nor horns, but the matter of pony breeds would be a question for another time. There were enough identity issues on my plate already. My hooves met dirt, packed smooth and hard by generations of ponies before me, and landed with satisfying clops. Hooves, both shod and unshod, clattered all around me. My ears were filled with the music of Equestria at work as I meandered through town, sometimes literally. At one cross avenue a pair of ponies sang to one another as they painted a house. A mare's rich contralto danced around by a stallion's high tenor. Unless there were a lot of pony songs about house painting, it was likely they were improvising the lyrics on the spot, too. Perhaps they were just talented. Regardless, I was glad of the decision not to bring Marcus and Naomi along. It wasn't so much that I was worried about how the ponies would react to them, though I still wanted to put feelers out and meet Light without them being around. No, after seeing this with my own eyes, I didn't think Naomi could have handled the raw cuteness that seeped from every corner without blowing her top. Eventually, though, it became clear that I wasn't going to find Leitmotif wandering around at random. Even if I did go to every part of town, which could take me all day, if not much, much longer, there must have been thousands of ponies here, each with his or her own distinct mix of colours and an identifying mark on their rears, which seemed to indicate something of note. Only some of the few foals I saw seemed to lack one. The chances of running into one particular pony out of so many were astronomical. Just as I was considering the problem too, one of those innumerable ponies noticed me.
"Hey there!"
The voice from heaven nearly made me jump out of my skin. Panting, I glanced up to find the dark stallion from earlier looking right down at me. His wings beat a steady rhythm as he hovered effortlessly overhead, and I found myself staring yet again. A horse that must have weighed well over 300 pounds was suspended directly overhead on wings that had a span of 8 feet, if that. They were impressive on their own, certainly, but hardly enough to lift a creature that size. Apparently, he'd taken my gawking for interest, and soon alighted on the earth next to me. He stood himself to his full height, and I got to confirm first-hand my observations. He had nearly half a foot of height on me, and his body was noticeably bulkier in most respects. Everything about him, from his shoulders to his head to his legs, was heavier, and that seemed to hold true of the other ponies passing in the street. Evidently, equestrian mares and stallions had more sexual dimorphism going for them than the horses back home. The stallion grinned as the silence dragged on.
"You get the sun in your eyes, or is that just me?"
Oh, great. I'd somehow run into Marcus's missing twin. To be fair, I had been sizing the stallion up for like a piece of meat. "I'm sorry." I half lifted a hoof towards him apologetically. "I'm new in town. Well, I certainly had no intention of explaining to him that I had never seen an equestrian stallion in my life before." "Hi." Well, it worked for Lyra.
"Hey. So, new in town."
He tapped his chest.
"Pleasure to meet you. I'm Thunderlane. I'm kind of the top weather pony around here. See that beautiful sky? Yours truly."
"Daphne." I glanced upwards, frowning. It seemed like a normal, everyday sky to me, a nice blue with a few puffy white clouds here and there. My mind flashed back to the seemingly solid line of storm clouds outside the Everfree, wondering at the term weather pony and what it entailed. It could have been some metaphorical way to say he was a forecaster, but that didn't seem to fit. Glancing back at Thunderlane, I could see that he had a lot more going for him in the way of muscles than most of the other ponies around. They stood out under his charcoal coat, and bunched powerfully at the joints of his second set of shoulders. If he was a weather magician of some sort, he sure worked out a lot on top of that. It's nice.
Nice.
He glanced up as well, frowning.
Well, I'll admit it's no Rainbow Dash job, but still.
He grinned back down at me.
I see you're a tough one to impress, though. I'm after to really pull the stops out tomorrow. Can't let you think we're slackers here in Ponyville.
I quirked a brow at him. You don't happen to own a black jacket, do you?
Eh?
He rubbed his chin.
Well, not right now, but with winter fall this close, I could see myself getting one. Yep, that could be pretty cool.
He ruffled his feathers, lifting his chin. It was only at that point that I realized he had been flirting with me the entire time. My eyes opened wider, and I took in his stance, leaning a little forward, his eyes intent on mine, face open and inviting. He was definitely making moves on the new girl in town. The notion that the local stallions may be interested in me had never once occurred before that point, and it was difficult to put a hoof down on how I felt about it. Perhaps, if I spent enough time as a mare, I might come to appreciate my new species, but that was a thought which was alarming on many levels. Before I could really process an appropriate way to shoot him down, though, another figure swooped in. Like Thunderlane, she was a Pegasus, but her coat was a dull lavender, and her mane was an upward shock of platinum white that flowed wildly down the back of her neck. "Thunderlane! What are you doing slacking off down here?" she demanded as she thrust herself up at him. She had that same lithe, muscled grace about her that seemed to indicate powerful athleticism.
"Cloud Chaser!"
Thunderlane backed away a step as his face reddened. He lifted a hoof defensively.
No, I can explain. I was just welcoming Daphne here to Ponyville.
You can flirt with cute blondes in your own time. She poked his chest, glaring him down. It wasn't hard for her. She was nearly his own height, if much more slender, and there was an air of ferocity about her. "We've got to pick up Rainbow Dash's slack!" Thunderlane grumbled.
"I don't see why. It's not my fault she's flown the coop."
"And it will be your fault if we aren't ready in time for winterfall." She flared her periwinkle wings at him. "Now, get your butt back on the air." Thunderlane continued to grumble as he leapt upwards, letting his wings carry him back into the sky. Cloud Chaser turned toward me. "Sorry about that. He's a good guy, if a little cocky." "It's okay. I know someone a lot like him." I rolled my eyes back towards the forest. I couldn't help adding, "I love your mane, by the way." Cloud Chaser grinned and tidied herself. "Hey, what can I say? Some pony's gotta be cool. Might as well be me." She turned and twitched her tail, gathering her legs to jump. "Enjoy the town, Daphne." Her own rise made Thunderlane seem clumsy, the difference between a powerful boxer and a martial artist. She swept her wings below her and glided into the air, flying with a swimmer's grace, all smooth lines. Once I had finished admiring her flight, I kicked myself. "Damn it, Daphne, you forgot to ask them if they knew leitmotif." I would just have to keep looking. Continuing down the street, my eyes wandered from the ponies I passed to the houses and stores. They were becoming denser as I meandered towards what seemed to be the center of town. Storefronts and quaint little alleyways were becoming the norm. One place had a wide set of double doors, marked with enormous hoofprints. Glancing inside, I could see a thriving restaurant, where the waitstaff moved between tables with trays balanced on their backs. It was as if I had stumbled into some bizarre Animal Farm reality, where ponies had risen up and conquered man. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, I muttered under my breath. Of course, the horse didn't exactly have a happy ending in that story, so that probably wasn't the direction I wanted to start thinking. There was enough different about Ponyville that it seemed unlikely. the width of stairs, the shape of doorknobs, and more. But there was an alarming concurrence to the architecture and lifestyles of these people that I was hard-pressed to find an explanation. After all, even on Earth there were hundreds of cultures with wildly different styles of dress and building. Why should Equestria resemble a sort of European pastiche? I frowned, pausing by a fruit stand. Our worlds were synced up in some fashion. It was clear from those ancient scribbles we'd found on those thugs that humans and ponies did have some shared history. The possibility existed that Western civilization had borrowed from the ponies rather than the other way around, or that there had been some sort of exchange. "Excuse me, miss." I glanced up from my musings to see a couple looking at me. It may have been my reading too much into things, but it seemed to me that this pair were older than me by a fair margin, 10 to 20 years at least. There was a certain maturity to their features that I had not seen in the other ponies I'd met. The mare, a green pony with neither horn nor wings, smiled slightly. "Are you quite all right?" "I'm fine, thank you." I offered her a smile in turn, glancing between her and the stallion. I did a double-take, staring at the prominent moustache and beard he wore on his solid, blocky face. "Sure you're all right, miss?" he asked, in an accent with more than a little twang. I was forced to amend my earlier thought. Equestria was not only synced with Europe, but with the American Southwest as well. "You look a sight, you do." I craned my neck around. It was still weird doing that. So much of my height was neck, it was a little alarming at times. There wasn't really any need to examine myself. I was still exactly as trail-worn as I had been upon meeting Lyra. No new bruises or cuts anywhere. "I just had a bad run is all. Got scratched up in the woods." The stallion stared at me. "Celestia's teeth! You weren't in the Everfree, were you?" "Look at her ankles." The mare pointed a hoof at my legs. "She looks like she's run for days." "I think you sprained that rear one, didn't you?" "Well, yeah, but it was really minor." "Nonsense." The stallion shook his head. They closed in on either side of me. "Come on, little miss. We ought to get you to the hospital right away. You don't want that getting worse on you." I raised my eyebrows. "There's a hospital here." "Sure enough," the stallion said. "Ponyville General. Serves the whole region, it does. You must be new in town, right enough." The mare moved to support my sprained leg, while the stallion half-hauled me. "Gah!" I squirmed out of their grasp, turning to look at them with some surprise. "Grabby much?" "Aw, shucks, miss." The stallion stepped forward. "We don't mean nothing by it. I can't very well stand the sight of an injured pony." "You absolutely must get proper care," the mare agreed. Her eyes watched me uncertainly, as if I might fall over at any moment. "I'm okay. Seriously. I had a field dressing and, I'm going to see someone who knows medicine." Thinking quickly, I added, I don't suppose you know her, actually. Leitmotif. She's a mare my age, with a black mane and navy blue coat." "No, can't say that I do." The mare frowned at her companion. The stallion rubbed at his chin. "What's her cutie mark like?" Well, it's all right. I'm sure you can find her. You just scooch on over to Sugar Cube Corner, miss. They'll set you straight there." "Sugar Cube Corner? Yes, of course." I gave them both a strange smile, nodding. Where can I find that?" "Just take the tunnel here and head for the market." He gestured to his left, where a stairway descended through a tunnel under one of the larger buildings. I nodded again, bidding the pair a good-bye before trotting through, my hooves echoing around me. These ponies are proving almost aggressively helpful. Even a police officer back home wouldn't have batted an eye at someone with such minor battering. Actually, in all likelihood, they would have watched me more closely under suspicion of being a vagrant. The tunnel exited into a wide cobbled area, and I meandered around the shops and stalls. That I should have asked what Sugar Cube Corner was became increasingly evident. The fact that I couldn't read the signs left me with little recourse but to ask someone for directions, something I was feeling decidedly self-conscious about. It was getting to be a little oppressive, in a way I had not anticipated. The ponies were nothing if not friendly, but my headlong rush for leitmotif had stalled and left me rudderless. Ponies wandered from stall to stall, as the ponies inside them barked their wares, all in the growing shadow of a massive circular building with a balcony on its second story. Turning to the stands, I considered a few of the options before stepping up to one that seemed particularly likely, joining its queue. Each of the ponies ahead of me dumped small silvery coins onto the counter and came away with bulging bags. I stepped aside for an older stallion behind me, and then took my turn at the front, hoping the proprietor wouldn't be too annoyed with the request for information without purchase. "Aw, shucks, Sugar Cube, you sure look as you could use a pick-me-up," the mare on the other side said, resting her forehoofs against the stall's countertop and offering me a giant grin on her freckled orange face. "Is that bad?" I asked, pretending to be browsing the selection. I let another pony go ahead of me in line to make up for it. The variety of the dishes arrayed at the apple cart were mildly astounding, featuring not only raw apples, but racks of various apple-based pastries that were doing a number on my nose. My sweet tooth moaned and cursed my lack of local currency. It seemed a safe bet that this cart came from the orchard I had seen in my first glimpses of Ponyville. "If new car looking like you just went through apple-bucking season without a wink bad, well, I'd be inclined to call it that," she agreed, tapping her hat higher over her blonde bangs. "Customs appreciated," she assided to a pair of middle-aged mares, who made away with a stack of apple tarts. "So what can I do for you?" she directed at me. "You look like a pony in need of something special. Wait, let me guess. Fresh, hot apple cinnamon pie." My stomach growled, and I had to wipe my mouth with a foreleg to keep the drool from showing. Wow, that sounds utterly fantastic. I was actually hoping if you could help me figure out how to find someone. Some pony, I mean. A friend of mine. I'm in town visiting." "I thought you might have been new to town. You got that travelling look about you," she said, and seemed genuinely excited to hear it, for all that I also admitted I wasn't a customer. The fact that I was letting other ponies through probably helped, but it was still oddly welcoming. "Wouldn't be no skin off my back to point you in the right direction. Who are you after then, Sugar Cube?" "A unicorn. Leitmotif. Dark coat and mane, sort of a dark blue and black, respectively," I answered. "Can't say as I've met her, though I'm sure I remember a unicorn of that description," the mare said apologetically. Even as I started to deflate, however, she boldly tapped me on the chin with a hoof and grinned again. "But there's a pony in town who abso-positively has. You just scoot yourself on over to the building yonder that looks like a frosted cake, and ask for Pinkie Pie. She knows every pony in town. Course, you stick around her long enough, she's liable to find you anyway, and throw you a party. So it's probably best you just go to her and get it over nice and quick." Turning my head, I saw what she meant immediately. At the far end of the market stood a confection disguising itself as a building, or perhaps the other way around, it was hard to be sure. I would have to see if any pony was nibbling on it. Turning back to thank the helpful mare, I found myself confronted with a steaming slice of pie. Gooey, baked apple oozed languidly out of a crisp crust onto a paper plate, and the smell of it nearly made my melt on the spot. "Now don't you go thinking this is going to be the norm. Pony like you looks like you deserve a break, and you can call it your official Applejack welcome to town on the house slice. Further slices are, of course, available at a reasonable price," she said, beaming. I stammered, unable to express my gratitude as she set it down. It was hard to resist simply devouring the slice on the spot, so I simply abandoned restraint and snuffed it right off the plate, Wretched mare. She was a cocaine pusher. Now that I had been hooked on a free sample, she could charge me whatever she damn well pleased, and I would come running for my fix. Woo-wee! She whooped and laughed, and several other ponies around me joined in as well. I flushed, embarrassed, and then burped. Pardon? And you're welcome, she answered with a nod. Healthy appetite, all right. You skedaddle on now. Find your friend. I will, thank you, I said, and practically pranced across the cobbles of the market. Ponyville wasn't perfect. That probably would have required cell phone towers, a space elevator, or an armed regiment ready to help me take Amelia back. But it was definitely turning out to be a pleasant stop. As I approached the giant cake house, though, I had to abruptly skid to a stop, my hooves splayed. A mare had stopped dead in the middle of the street ahead of me, and I had very nearly ploughed full on into her, distracted as I was. "Oh my gosh, hi!" She turned and greeted me as though she couldn't be happier by our meeting. We could have been old friends reunited for the first time in years as far as she was concerned. "Hi," I said, unable to match that level of enthusiasm even if I tried. It was enough of a shift from my meeting with Lyra and the stall owner, Applejack, that it left me grinding a bit on the gears. Absorbing her presence was almost as difficult as Lyra's had been, and that had been my first time meeting another equestrian in 8 years. Explosively pink was probably the operating phrase. "Are you Pinkie Pie?" I managed to ask after a moment. "Sure am!" She threw her forelegs wide. "And you're new in town. I know, because I know everybody in town, so if there's some pony in town I haven't met before then that means it's some pony new. Otherwise I already would know them, because any pony else in town is somebody I already know, seeing as how I know every pony." Pony? My eyes were crossing in the attempt to follow the line of conversation. When I shook my head, I could swear I heard something rattling in my skull. "Exactly! Since we've established that, I've never seen you before, and that you're new in town, that means you've just made a brand new friend." "I have?" I asked, startled. "Who?" "Me, silly!" She giggled. "So what kind of party would you like? I'm totally getting into theme parties after my alicorn party last summer, you know, so I figured that'd be a sweet way to spice up my game, and every pony just loves my sweet and spicy lemon twist, so I always end up bringing those too." I stammered. Halloween's coming up, right? How's that for a theme?" "Hollow spleen, huh?" She looked puzzled, but quickly brightened. "I don't have any idea what that is, but I bet I can work with it. What do you do with a hollow spleen, and when does it come up?" Smacking my face with a hoof, I cursed myself for letting her knock me so off balance. To be entirely fair, though, she was liable to tilt the plant's axis if she tried hard enough. I mean, costumes, candy. It's a tradition where I'm from, and— "Oh! Nightmare Night! You must come from a really cool place for it to be called Hollow Spleen. Or really gross. Or really cool and gross. Kind of like a glazed cake you find forgotten in the back of the fridge and it's turned into a solid block of rock made of sugar." It was hard not to be caught up in Pinkie's enthusiasm, and I found myself smiling almost against my will. "How about a Nightmare Night party, then?" I suggested, and she beamed right back at me. "Done and done! So what's your name, new pony?" she asked, inspecting me with casual indifference to personal space. "I'm Daphne." I kept my saddlebags planted firmly on my flanks in case she decided to peek. "I was actually hoping you'd point me to someone I knew in town." "Oh! You know someone in town? That's so neat. I bet you two must be great friends for you to walk all that way and end up with all those scrapes and bruises." Well, no wonder Applejack had singled me out as particularly trailbeat. Yeah, we are. I haven't seen her for a long time, and I trailed off, realizing the other pony had started to draw me out. There was such a shine of innocence and such unconditional love and joy about her that I had felt comforted the moment I saw her. This was a pain that was very private, though, and this sweet mare would have to wait before I spilled any part of that on her shoulders. I'm sorry. Her name is Leitmotif, and I've been looking for her for most of my life. To her enormous credit, Pinkie Pie didn't press for more details. Oh, that's easy. She's just 10 houses down that way on the left. She pointed down one of the cozy side streets leading off the market. You should probably go see her. I bet you two have loads of catching up to do if it's been that long. Thank you, I murmured in her general direction, already distracted. I paused to shake her hoof in gratitude before turning and marching the way she'd indicated. If anything, my steps were growing more tepid as my trepidation built. 8 years of separation, months of therapy, and years of burying myself in a safe, constructed world of conformity lay between us, all contained within a mere 100 or so yards of space. Each step failed to move me past any of that. In fact, it pushed it together more tightly, compressing that time and those feelings into a tight block of fear, pain, and regret. The block did not merely settle in my stomach. It took up shop and started to export itself to all parts of my body. My legs felt numb, awkward and unfeeling as they left the ground and returned to packed earth. My mouth dried, leaving me unable to ask any pony I saw for further direction. My ears flattened, dimming all sound. My eyes stung, and I had to rely on increasingly narrow tunnel vision as I studiously counted houses. If any pony stopped to ask if I needed help, I neither saw nor heard them, and at that particular moment in time, I certainly didn't care. I must have walked in front of her house and her door 6 times before I was satisfied that I was at the right one. Counting 9 houses and then 10, I then counted 11 to make sure that Pinkie had been inclusive with her count and not exclusive. It took 3 tries to confirm that building number 11 on the left was a store with a quill and a sofa on the sign. Several minutes were needed to prevent myself from hyperventilating. Breathing in and out, I studied the thatch-roofed house, with a heart-shaped window cut into the front door, and shrubs growing against the first-floor walls. There was no way of knowing what I might find inside. Perhaps Leitmotif still lived with her parents. She was near the same age as me, after all, and ponies didn't age any faster or slower, as far as I knew. Maybe they married earlier, though, and she had a husband and little foals running around. When I faced the door again, and put into mind all of the memories I had of our time together, though, I felt something sharp and hot melt away the ice that had been flowing through my veins. It filled my limbs with strength again, and lent me new sight. The susurrations of doubt burned up in the fire of my resolve. I could have spent all day worrying and moaning and practicing greetings, but I wasn't going to let 1 more second get between me and Leitmotif if I could help it. I reached out with one hoof and knocked on her door. Leitmotif. It was late. Once again, I had slept in. An imprint of my pen remained against the side of my face, along with a fair portion of the words that had been inked. I lifted scroll and pen groggily to examine both critically. One good vellum scroll, written upon which was a claim summarizing the damage done to Town Hall by a rampaging cave eel. It was mostly salvageable. Spilled ink blotted out most of the page and made the words worthless, but the material could be washed and saved. One rare griffin-constructed fountain pen engraved with the maker's signature, treacherous but unharmed. Finally, one mahogany writing desk, expertly crafted by local artisans. The finish would need to be stripped and reapplied, though the stop at the bottom had both prevented the ink from dripping onto the floor, whilst simultaneously digging painfully into my neck. While massaging the soreness with a hoof, I discovered the final damage, myself. My hoof came back damp, and I sighed as my already inky black mane drooped sadly, heavy and wet. I went to all fours and lifted my horn. Magic shut the windows that had been left open overnight, and stilled the wind that had been blowing the curtains. A cloth unfolded itself and mopped up the spill, then wrapped around my mane to keep it from dripping further. The pen's decorative holder was straightened. My forehoof tapped out a slow, steady beat on the hardwood as last night's open scrolls were carefully refurled and slotted. The last thing my magic brought to me was a little leather-bound journal, which I opened to a fresh page, noted the date with a flourish, and wrote, "Woke at around 1:20 in the afternoon, yet again failing to set alarm. Have to start last part of previous night's work again, but after I clean up the mess and bathe. Miss Rainbow Dash's latest foray into the field of being an act of nature will just have to wait. It's not as though she's around to answer for any of the damages this time, anyway." Sadly, though, there was no writing somebody else up for my own mistakes. A mare just had to own up and do what had to be done. I dotted the last sentence particularly hard, and set the diary aside before starting downstairs. Shelves lined with glass glowed in the subdued light that filtered in through the curtains. Resin, button, and painted eyes watched me as I worked my way down. I smiled, and reached out a hoof to buff the head of the porcelain tiger guarding my tea set before opening the door to my bathroom. A thought occurred as I scrubbed my face and mane out under the sink, and I stared at the big tub in the corner. To be able to soak all day instead of working would be very fine indeed. Just let the cramps and tension flow out into hot, sudsy water. It couldn't hurt, really. Not if it was just for a bit. My work wasn't going anywhere, and no pony had yet come running for an adjustment so far. Would one day out of the week really kill productivity that much? My hoof tapped at the sink. In the end, the decision had not been all that difficult. As the tub swelled with bubbles and steaming water, my anticipation grew. A tiny little spark of excitement dared to light. It was perhaps a little strange to feel a daring thrill at the thought of a day off, but I took what I could get. Not that it was ever that easy. There would be a fire tomorrow, or Rainbow Dash would finally return with her entire extended family in tow and destroy the town. The office in Canterlot would find me dead, drowned in my own paperwork. The weather mare was probably outside the window right now, waiting for me to lower my guard, so she could demolish all of Ponyville in some fantastic stunt. Just watching. All I had to do was put my little hooves into the tub, and I could kiss the town goodbye. Then again, if Ponyville found itself carried off into the sky, it seemed doubtful any pony would be around to file a report for it. No more claims for disasters, be they natural, unnatural, or caused by mangy, colourful Pegasi, the most unnatural of all. 1, 2, 3, and finally 4 hooves slid into the water, and I began to melt. Just as a knock came at the front door. "Dang it! Dang it! Dang it!" I muttered, banging my head against the side of the tub a few times. For a moment, I considered the merits of simply ignoring the door, and hoping whoever it was would just go away. Let them pound at my door. This was also the only chance I would have for weeks to relax. Perhaps it was good news, though. Perhaps some pony had found a baby dragon, and needed me to take care of it for a little while, until they could find a good adoptive parent. It would be nice to have someone sweet to dote on for a bit. I could scrub his little scales and tuck him in at night, until he got greedy, stole my figurines, ate my gems, and tore down my house in a horrific rampage that ended in the town being burnt to the ground. The knock came again, and I shouted, "Coming!" The hot soak, like the daydream about the dragon, had soured, no longer offering the comfort I had sought. Untempered joy led to heartache, just as it always has. Wrapped in a fluffy blue robe, my mane dripping along my side and my tail dragging on the floor, I crossed the front room. Ideally, the interloper would see the state I was in and realize they had inconvenienced me. A speckle of guilt never hurt any pony. My hoof lay on the handle, and I eased the crankiness out of my features. The handle creaked, and I pulled the door in. Standing on my front steps was a unicorn mare of my own age, who looked rather the worse for wear. With untrimmed hooves and hair, red bruises under her tan coat, and the occasional freshly healed cut, she looked as though she'd picked up a fight with a bear and then spent a couple weeks recuperating in its cave. I actually felt a little petty, seeing how much she had evidently gone through to get here, and finding me presented as I was. The girl's green eyes widened, and she examined me as intently as I examined her. She ducked her head and rubbed her golden blonde mane awkwardly, but when she brought herself up again, her eyes had lit up. I was forced to take back my assessment of her, seeing her in this new light. Joy turned her from weary and bedraggled to something beautiful, accented by the mess. It was all so strangely familiar. "Hi," she said, swallowing slightly. The mare swayed a moment, seeming to be trying to gather herself up. "Hi, leitmotif," she started again, and my brows knit slightly. There was something important I was missing here. Something... It's me, Daphne. I slammed the door in her face. That should have been the end of it. Naturally, given the course of my life, it was not. It was proving increasingly difficult to block out her insisting pounding at my door. The mare, that vile, evil mare, was stronger than she looked, and her hooves rattled the door in its frame. As I lay across my sofa, staring at that door with stinging, bloodshot eyes, my forehoof tapped a sharp staccato rhythm against the sofa's arm. "Makes no sense," I muttered. "Was it Reggio? Cousin Bass? They always did think they were funny."
"Hello? Leitmotif, it's me, Daphne. I need to talk to you,"
she called through the door. Her horn became visible in one of the windows, and I slammed the curtain shut with a flash of magic.
"Told them not to come around. They aren't welcome any more," I continued under my breath. Her hoofs tapped against the window. I winced, and my hoof beat faster against the sofa, trying to figure out which member of my family had decided to play such a cruel and insidious prank. Charitably, they may have just been upset at my not returning their letters. I just needed to remain calm and not let them get a rise out of me. My hoof tapped faster.
"Light, please, tell me what's wrong,"
her voice begged from outside. The mare's face stuck into another window, and I slammed that one shut as well. Then again, informing my parents in no uncertain terms never to darken my doorstep ever again may have triggered some resentment. They might simply have told some pony else, some pony simple and innocent, who would have no idea how much pain she was causing me with her prank.
"Lyra!"
I shouted. My voice cracked painfully, but it got the message out.
"If you're out there and you put her up to this, you had better come clean and apologize, or so help me. I'll tell every pony who knocked down the South Tower at school. I swear."
The pony on the other side of the door hissed, and something hard slammed into the door. It sounded rather like her head, actually.
"I could have asked Lyra where to find you."
Damn it, damn it, damn it.
That was a little off-putting. Her vituperation continued sulphurously for a few moments, too. That was language that just wasn't used by civilized ponies, especially in public. I did not want to listen to her, regardless of whether she was cursing or singing, so I blocked it out. The invader's damnable knocking didn't stop there, however. Pity. It would have been convenient if she had split her head. Well, horrifying, actually. That's an awful thing to wish on any pony, even some pony so hurtful. There was no way I was going to try and confront her, not without some pony much bigger to help. Besides, the last thing I wanted was for some pony to see me upset at this.
Or worse, learn it had even happened. With her hammering and shouting, the latter was becoming nearly impossible, but acknowledging it would make it exquisitely worse. Rising from the couch, my hooves beat out a frustrated pattern on the flooring as I paced it. No pony had a right to violate my house like this. No pony but me had a right to be in it at all, if I didn't want them to be. In a house I had built, filled with things that I loved and that I had collected personally. How dare some wretched mare come and claim to be a part of my life, a life I had built for myself, free of any pony I didn't want in it, least of all some mare who was probably put up to it by an embittered relative. Her prattling and knocking about outside continued, growing more tenacious, and I started to look for something, anything, that could distract me until she gave up. My attention was taken up examining the parts of my collection I had on display in the living room. Though tempted, I left the minotaur swords where they hung against the wall, and studied the craftsmanship of the zebra masks. It was a little world of fascinating things that had been carefully constructed and assembled to please and amaze, each piece either unique or emblematic. So what if few ponies ever saw it except those rare friends and interested collectors I let in, past the inconspicuously blank exterior walls of my house? That made it all the more special. It was my world, filled with my things, and no pony should be allowed to intrude upon that.
"Look, I just want a minute,"
she called, beating at the walls and my skull at the same time. My eye twitched. I longed for something to put my hooves on, to busy myself with. My eye fell to the sofa's end table, where an exquisite little penguin and an artful purple glass pony, wearing a replica of Princess Twilight Sparkle's gala dress, lay, and I gently picked them up and handled them a bit. A thought wriggled in through the barrier erected in my mind, the notion of playing a cute little scene out with the pair of them. A crystal Princess Twilight and her battle against the villainous Emperor Penguin fought out over the enchanted pomegranates of... No, I told myself. That's the sort of games fools would play. I am no longer a fool, and I haven't been since she failed to see me that day. Since she broke her promise and left me on the riverbank. Left me wanting until darkness fell, and I had to crawl back across the Everfree, alone. She broke my heart, like it was so much fine porcelain. Whoever this witch was, alarming persistence appeared to be a key personality trait of hers.
"Please, light,"
she begged through one of the covered windows, her voice thick with emotion.
"You have to believe it's me. I'm really here. I'm supposed to be a human, and I came to the Everfree Forest looking for you."
"Any pony could have told you that!" I snapped, and heard a clink as my hooves shook. I gasped and looked down with horror, checking over the figurines for damage. The penguin had a tiny little scratch on his beak from where I had tapped it against the glass fruit. Damn it, these aren't toys, I reminded myself. It had taken this mare all of 5 minutes to prove my incaution disastrous. Now I was swearing too. Fantastic. Just one more crack. Gently, I put the figurines back on the tablecloth, resolving to get my poor little bird repainted as soon as possible. It was almost too much. Somehow, that monstrous creature outside had violated my home, had violated me, without so much as stepping inside. With the curtains shut and the afternoon sun banished, my living room was suddenly a very dark and foreboding place. It was no longer the safe haven it once was, penetrated by that thing's shrieks. Would that the tigers and dragons scattered about could come to life and defend my little home, but they were no more match for her than I. My home was supposed to be a safe place. It was supposed to be somewhere to take shelter from my life's tribulations, be they natural or pony-made. My hoof tapped hard against the floor as I stared blankly at the cabinets and walls surrounding me. She pounded again. "Just go away!" I shouted aimlessly. "I don't care who put you up to it. Just go away and leave me alone." Another moment and I would be sobbing, so I ran for the stairwell, my hooves hammering along with my heart. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of hearing me break down.
"Wait! I can prove it! Don't go!"
As I reached the stairs, a new sound reached me, one that cut through my panic like a knife. I stopped, and my ears swiveled towards the door. 5 bars. The mare on the other side was vocalizing. She was both terribly out of key and yet quite distinct. Impossible, I thought, my heart catching in my throat. No pony knows that melody. It could have been a magic spell considering the effect it had upon me. My legs were paralyzed. My eyes opened as wide as they could. The only thing that moved was a forehoof, tapping a beat faster and faster on the step. 5 bars again. The same ones, unmistakably. It was as though a key had turned in a latch. A vault opened in my mind, stirring ancient dust. Our melody. On and on it went. She would hum the tune, stop, and then hum those bars again. It kept up for what felt like an eternity, but could only have been a few seconds at best. It could have been a trick. Some pony had done the impossible and read my mind. Except I had deliberately not thought about it for years. Some mad fool had left back through time, but to spy upon 2 little girls playing in a forest. It could have been a changeling, except there was simply no chance a changeling could have happened on such a thing, and wouldn't one simply have taken her shape instead of this bastardization? There she went again, humming the same bars over and over again. Her voice squeaked painfully on the latest repetition. She was atrocious at singing. Just like... There were little sobbing noises interspersed with the bars now, rendering them incomprehensible. But she kept trying anyway. It sounded like a heart breaking into little pieces, shattering like porcelain. Somehow, the door was in front of me. A trembling hoof worked the handle. Just a peek wouldn't hurt. She was sitting on my doorstep, her tears streaming openly down her face as she cried, eyes shut tightly, her head hung low. The sounds were no longer coherent through her wails. It was so raw that ponies all along the street were trying not to look, unable to even gaze upon such unfiltered suffering. I could, though. I couldn't not. My upraised forehoof, which had been tremblingly pattering out a rhythm on the wood of my door, fell still and silent. The stilling of that rhythm broke what little protection my thoughts had left. It no longer worked. I could no longer keep myself from hearing the similarities in her voice, from recognizing the color of her hair, from comprehending the unblemished longing on her face. No matter how hard I tried not to look, there she was. Daphne. Daphne. Daphne, I croaked. She choked down her sobs. Light, I'm sorry. My hooves went forward. They felt at her face, neck, chest, and barrel, making sure that she was real, that she was there. My magic flared, but no changeling was revealed under that skin. Daphne, her, it was really her, submitted to my examination. She practically slumped into a puddle right there, her forelegs heaving under her own weight. We were going to meet each other's families, remember? She said, breathless. Her eyes pried themselves open just a touch, and she looked at me. We were going to be sisters together. I've come so far. They made me leave. I'm so sorry for scaring you. I don't know what you've been through. Oh, Light, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Her own trembling hooves found me. It was like she didn't even know how to grip with them, the hard surfaces of her feet shaking as they awkwardly slid around me. Her saddlebag slid to the ground, and I found that her haunches were unmarked, like a foal who had grown into a mare without ever discovering her talent. Unbidden and unstoppable, memories tore their way into the front of my mind. A little girl whose endless worlds of wonder had sucked me in day after day. A riverbank where she spun tales and adventures with word and gesture. By some impossible happenstance, she had been deposited here on my doorstep, beaten by things I knew not what, to come find me. So many times before, Daphne had welcomed me into her worlds of imagination. It was only fair to take her into my world, to shelter her from the prying eyes outside. The door shut behind us with a flare of my horn, and with a gentle click, the lock snapped shut,